Hello and welcome. My name is Lita Boy, and welcome yet again to another episode of Roots of Wisdom, the podcast, which is dedicated to restoring the role of the elder in modern times. Now, today I'm very, very excited about this conversation. It took me a while to track her down. She's consistently busy serving other people, so it's a deep privilege and an honor to have her, We met a while ago. I think it was 4 years ago. We were doing a process together around ancestral lineage healing, and I truly connected with her, and I was blessed enough to be able to meet on several occasions. I truly do see her as an elder, someone that really, really immerses themselves in community and with a deep understanding of what community is. Dr. Love, I usually don't introduce elders. I just say, hey, let them introduce themselves, because who am I to speak on behalf of the elder? So take it away. Who are you? And just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Lita. It's good to be in this conversation space with you. I am Dr. Velma Love. I am the director of the Doctor of Ministry program at the Interdenominational Theological Center in Atlanta, Georgia. So this has been sort of my appointment at ITC has been a long time in the making. I think it probably started when I was born. I was born into a family in the rural South of the United States during the segregation era. So my experiences as a young child, as a young quote, back then we were colored. That was before we were called Black. We were called colored people. So my experiences during that time actually shaped me. So at a very young age, I knew that I wanted to grow up, go to college, get arrested, go to jail for being a freedom fighter. That was my ambition. So I say that, from my earliest memories are about social injustice and about being angry and feeling like there were so many things wrong in the world. So to give you an example, when I was, I don't know, maybe 5, 6, there were no colored dolls on the market, but my mom had showed me this news flyer, this little newspaper magazine that came in the mail. And there was a picture of this cute little, quote, colored doll. And so I asked for that for Christmas. When I didn't get it, when I got a white doll, I was so upset. I would refuse to play with it. I went back to bed, covered up my head. Would not get up and play. And my mother was so hurt. She tried to explain to me that there were no, quote, colored dolls in the store. And I said, they do have them because I saw them on that. So that's an example of how my environment shaped me, and at a very young age, recognized racial injustice and social injustice. And at a very young age, made a commitment that what I wanted to do with my life was to address those issues. So that's the backstory.
Thank you for sharing that. I think another aspect which is beyond that is your spiritual path is initiating into various paths. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit more about that as well. I hear the social injustice aspects, which is very important, but I'm curious about your spiritual walk and what led you to where you are right now.
That's a long story. All right. As I said, I grew up in the rural South. My grandfather owned acreage, like over 100 acres of land. And so I have 9 siblings, and we grew up close to the land. So my spiritual formation, then I contribute to being in nature. We would go for long walks in the woods, in the forest, pick wildflowers, go to the spring, go to the brooks. Part of our land had caves on it and canyons. We'd go and echo, and we stay out for hours at a time, just roaming the land. So I grew up like really, really close to nature. That I think was also part of my spiritual formation. And I grew up with women who like to create beauty. So my mother, even though we had very modest little hut, today we'd call it a shack, right? That we lived in. My mother planted flowers every year. So there was a beautiful flower garden on the side of this little, poverty house, I would call it. So I have that. So that creation of beauty was part of something that I learned to appreciate, and that was part of my spiritual upbringing. I was also in a Christian family. My parents were leaders in the church. My grandfather would call for family prayer every Sunday morning, and the entire family, extended family, because it was a whole lot of people lived in the house, right? So my grandfather would call everybody to prayer on a Sunday, and he would ask some of the children to read the Bible. I would always volunteer because I was so proud that I could read so well. And I got lots of affirmations and praise for that. So that was a part of my spiritual formation and shaping it. It was just part of life. I didn't know any other kind of way. It was also at a time where Black people were, what should I say, close knit. So families were very, very close knit. The church was kind of like the center of life in the country because you didn't see people during the week. Everybody looked forward to that fellowship time at church. One of my grandmothers was always concerned about the children. So she would bring snacks in her handbag. She would always have some cut apples or some gums or something, cookies, something for the children. So that was also part of my formation. So I kind of grew up with that desire for making the lives of children better. They were gift givers. So whenever you would visit, you would always come home with something.
Mm.
So, so one of my grandmothers would save old spools from thread and any kind of trinkets, mechanical things that she thought we would like. She'd just keep a bag, and when we come, she'd have these things, these kind of homemade toys for us. She would also mail us gift boxes. So we'd love to get these packages from her in the mail, which would have some candies and some scissors, some crayons, but just expressions of care and love. All of my aunts would do the same. They would always give you something. If they didn't have it, they would say, if I had known you were coming, I would have gotten something, but I don't have anything. But then they would find something. They'd find something, even if it were a plant or something or a piece of cake or whatever. There was this strong sort of economy of gift giving. So those are the things that kind of really shaped my value system. I was always an inquisitive child. So I asked lots of questions. And so my questions led me to explore spirituality and Christian traditions that were unbounded, non-Christian traditions. So then and after I went to college, I started studying metaphysics and really came to be interested in consciousness, became interested in African spirituality. I remember when I was a child, someone came to our church, this really tall, beautiful Black woman, and her hair was not straightened. And so I said, oh, like, who is she? And somebody said, oh, she just came back from Africa. And I said, I want to be like that. I want to be like that when I grow up. So there was this curiosity, like I never really accepted things without asking questions. And so that has led me on a unique kind of a spiritual path. When because I had this kind of social justice calling, when I went to college, I majored in sociology, and then I worked in community development, nonprofit agencies. And because I had a special concern for young people, I worked in youth development. I directed a Big Brothers Big Sisters agency. And at some point, I began to think that there was a spiritual solution to some of these issues. And once I got that idea, I had to pursue that idea. So I went to seminary because I was trying to figure out how I could help people use spirituality to improve their lives. And well, that's not what they were teaching in seminary. So I was a little bit disappointed, although I was at Union Theological Seminary in New York City, which was like the best place for me to be. So I was able to study with the well-known scholars like James Cone and Dolores Williams and all the people who were teaching Black theology and womanist theology and social justice. At that time, I was on an ordination track with the United Methodist Church. And then I realized that my quest was really not that. It wasn't to be a congregational pastor. It was something totally different, although I didn't know what it was. While I was at seminary, I read Malidoma Somei's book, The Healing Wisdom of Africa, and that had a profound impact on me, right? During that time, I also became interested in a village in South Carolina that I had known about before, but had not really explored. And this was Oyotunji Village in South Carolina. And I was living in New York and I needed to go to South Carolina for a church conference and decided while I was there, I would go to Oyotunji Village to see what this tradition was that they were talking about. There was a priest there, Chief of Jamu, who is in the land of the ancestors now. But he opened the door for me to learn more about the tradition, and it was an obsession. I went back to New York and I bought every book. I went to the Yoruba bookstore and I bought every book that I could find. I got on the subway. I had 2 big grocery bags full of books here, and I was staying up at night and I was reading, and I was look for somebody to talk to. So there was there's a black librarian at Union. Her name was Betty, and so I would stop at Betty's desk, and I was like, "Guess what I read?" And then we would have a conversation, and then because she was a librarian, she would point me to other sources, or she would order, other books from me on interlibrary loan. So that was part of my formation too, spiritually, and one thing led to another, and I wrote my dissertation about the Ifa tradition, specifically about the sacred text, the Odu, and it was difficult because I was kind of walking a path and creating the path at the same time. So there was nobody at Union Theological Seminary teaching African religious traditions in any kind of way. But I did have a professor who said if you said I could do interdisciplinary work, and he would find another scholar to be the subject matter specialist for my project. And so he identified Jacob Olupono, and Dr. Olupono and Dr. Vincent Wimbush were responsible for me being able to do that work on the Ifa tradition. And, eventually I went to Nigeria and experienced initiation because I thought that was the one thing that was missing in my studies. And it just kind of evolved. One thing led to another, and here I am.
Yes, it's a beautiful journey. And I guess what I always ask elders is, what are some of the teachings or the lessons that you've kind of gathered during your time? Because you've moved around quite a bit, working with the youth, working in social justice, entering into the spiritual world, and, redefining, I guess, what seminary could possibly look like in your role right now. I'm just curious to know, what are some of the teachings and the lessons that you've picked up on this journey so far?
I think maybe if I had to choose one thing that was most critical, it would be spending time to know yourself. Like really get to know yourself, get to know the story that you've lived and how you have interpreted that story and extended it. I studied with Malidoma Somei and became initiated as a diviner and was really fascinated with the medicine wheel because the medicine wheel kind of helps the individual understand their personal gifts, their personal medicine. And I think, that is really critical. So often we don't know how to help young people discover their genius. And so consequently, we have a lot of young people who are searching for something that they already have. They don't know that they carry this. So one of the roles I think of the elder is to invite the genius out. It's to really help young people to identify um, who they are and why they're here. So it was important for me to learn the traditional African philosophies about how we choose to come into the world, and we come with a purpose. We come with a purpose, but we forget that, of course. And then if we are fortunate, we are surrounded by village people, family people, community people who will steer us and direct us according to the gifts that they see. But if we're not fortunate to be in that mix, then we could stumble and fumble around for years or even for a lifetime without even knowing what our purpose is and why we came into the world. So with the medicine wheel, the medicine wheel provides some clues based on, your birth year and the elements. And so I use that tool a lot with, both in the academy and in the community to help people sort of situate themselves and tap into that inner power, that divine spirit energy within.
It's beautiful. So utilizing the tools to help people to remember their purpose.
Yes.
And just now there's a curiosity within me. What were some of the teachings that you learned from Malidoma? I mean, a lot of people would have loved to walk with him. You had the privilege of doing that. Could you share with us some insights, perhaps, of being in his presence and what he brought up for those around him?
Yeah, he was such an incredible soul. And when I studied divination with him, he always said that he wanted his students to take the tradition further, to be able to take it places where he could not. And I thought at the time, I don't know how that could be. I mean, he was a master diviner and he had adapted the position for the system for the Western mindset. And I couldn't imagine how any of us as his students could take it further. After his death, I felt that weight. I felt like I had to practice. I had to use what I had learned from him, and then I had to trust the spirit to guide me in whatever else I needed to do. And so it has happened. So I learned that from him. I learned the significance of ritual from him. Part of our initiation process was radical ritual for each of the 5 elements. And the one that was most, what should I say, impactful for me was the burial. And I thought, the burial, if I had known that was part of it, I never would have signed up for this. So there was a group of us, I think there were about 7 of us in this class, and we had to dig these graves, these shallow graves, that we could lie down in, and our other cohort members would cover us with dirt up to here. Well, I was like, okay, I'm going to be respectful, do this thing, but I put towels. My grave was lined with towels. And I had on a, jogging suit and long sleeve, I'm not touching the ground, right? So, because I had in my mind, I was like, oh my God, they're going to be bugs and ants and probably wiggly worms. And so it just was not something that I wanted to do, but I was in the program and I didn't want to be disrespectful. So I say, well, the instructions were when you are ready, you say, because there's an attendant that's sitting by there in case anything happens, and you can just say, I'm ready to get out. So I thought I would just stay in here for 5 minutes and then I'm going to say, I'm ready to get out, right? But it was completely different experience. It was an incredible experience, something I had never felt before or since, and it was being held. It was an experience of being held by the earth. It was very comforting and soothing. And I sort of went into some meditation space, and I was in there for over 30 minutes. I think they told me it was 40 minutes. And my body started to feel tingling. Like I said, oh, like it's like I'm getting numb. And I said, I'm ready to get out. And I was like, how long was I in there? And somebody said 40 minutes.
Wow.
That was, it gave me a new understanding of connection with the earth.
That's beautiful. The power of ritual.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I think let's segue into the ideology of being an elder. What, in your opinion, are some rituals that one needs to do in order to step into elderhood, if any at all?
I think a ritual is probably helpful. For me, there was not a ritual. I didn't self-identify as an elder until someone invited me to be part of a conversation, and they said this is the Council of Elders, and I was like, I'm the elder. And the people, the other people on the panel, they were like really like serious elders, older than me, and more well known and accomplished in all these things. And I thought, well, what am I, what do I have to contribute to this? So that invitation to be part of this conversation of elders, and I think it was called Under the Baobab Tree, and it was a conversation on sacred memory. So for me, I guess it was a kind of ritual, because it marked a new kind of emergence of a new self-understanding. So if there were intentional rituals, and that's one of the things that Balaban talked about a lot, was that in the Western culture, we don't have rituals that mark our progression. And that makes life more difficult. So I do think that a public ritual, a public recognition, something would be helpful. But yeah, I would never have thought of myself as an elder if someone had not said, I want you to be part of this elders conversation. And then I started being more aware of people coming to me. Because I would say, oh, I wonder why they asking me that. Why do these folk keep coming to ask me these things? I didn't even think of it that they're asking me because I have some wisdom to share. That wasn't part of my mindset. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Many of the elders always say that somehow you have to be old and gray before you call yourself an elder. And what I'm hearing you say is that that's not always the case, but it takes a community or others to recognize you as the elder for you to step into an elder. That's really interesting. I just wanted to also ask you then, what are the challenges of being an elder that you've come across and how have you overcome them?
Yes, I don't know. Seeing as how I wasn't naming myself and recognizing myself as an elder. So I didn't see challenges. Didn't, you know, people, I would say, folk ask me questions and it just seems natural to share what my perspective is. I don't know. I don't really recognize any challenges.
Do you see yourself as an elder though?
Well, now that you told me, yeah, now that folk keep saying it to me.
Okay. That's fascinating. So the next question becomes, what are the roles? I mean, what are the responsibilities, disciplines, and virtues of eldership besides denial?
I guess it's to really kind of appreciate maybe the responsibility. I know like I am the eldest in my immediate family, my siblings, and whenever there's a gathering, they'll ask me, do I have something to say or something? So then at first I was like, what? But then I realized, oh, the invitation to speak is really something to be taken seriously and to really share words that can be helpful to younger people. And I guess then that responsibility to make sure you are speaking in alignment with what the ancestors want to have transmitted to younger generations is a challenge. I mean, it's important. It is to be considered, it's to be taken seriously. So that is something that I learned along the way. After folk were kind of sort of pushing me out there, well, you the elder, like so.
If one embraces the idea of being an elder, which is something that's lost, we noticed over a period of time, what responsibility does it come with, So what would be you said something around the ancestors living in alignment to the ancestral expectations. What are those expectations? What's the responsibility? What's the duty? And what's the function of the elder in modern day times?
Function of the elder in modern day times. I guess one of the reasons why I kind of like don't initially didn't embrace that term because there's this image like in the South of the big mama, that's not me because I'm tiny, right? And the woman with the big voice and the woman that would hit you with the shoe and that would beat the kids, like I am none of that. So I had these images in my mind like that I didn't associate with, like, but I think now that I'm more enlightened, in the time that we currently live in, which is a very deeply troubling time, and I think it's kind of a in between space. It's a space where there's a lot of shifting and transitioning and going on, and it's a space where old stories have lost their connection or their power, and new stories have not yet emerged. So it's the role of the elders to sort of stand in that space, to stand in that gap, and be a connecting rod between the past and the future. Having lived, long enough to have some knowledge and wisdom and to have some vision, some visionary idea about what could be. So it really is the responsibility of the older, I think, to help generations speak new worlds into existence. And I sometimes for Black people in particular, I think because of the pain and trauma in our social history and the racialized trauma and uh, all of the memory of those harsh, horrifying conditions, we direct a lot of energy to either rehashing the story or rejecting the story. There's some folk who don't want to hear it, and there's some folk that don't want to hear anything else. And I think um, the responsible elder has a responsibility to help people move from Sankofa, which is, looking back, to Saku, which is the illumination of the spirit. So the illumination is a clearer insight and understanding of how to direct energy into summoning a different future, to co-creating with spirit a different future. But yeah, I think that is a serious role and responsibility of an elder.
Well, I love that. I love the idea of Sankofa to Saku. And I guess one of the main concerns is the relationship between the younger generation and the elders. Do you, throughout your work and throughout your time, have you found that there's a smooth relationality between the elders who are supposed to help to co-create this, or to pull out, I suppose, this vision of the future from the younger generations? Is there a good relationship between the younger generation and the elders in your experience?
I think that varies. My personal experience is I have a good, strong relationship with my granddaughters and nieces and my family, great nieces and all that. They look up to me. They want to know what I have to say. But from what I hear other folk talking about, that's not necessarily the case, that there is a gap. And as far as the Black church, the younger folk are just not there. They're missing. So their spiritual formation is not taking place in that centralized space. I think the spiritual formation is, in many cases, it's in a digital space, and it's not a space of interaction with elders. It's a space where they're kind of cobbling together in uninformed way what they may consider spirituality. So that poses a challenge, I think, for religious leaders, spiritual leaders, educators, elders, healers, like they're all up and down the line, all the caregivers. It poses a serious, well, let's just say an opportunity. It's an opportunity to design and co-create spaces that speak to the formation of younger people coming behind us.
Yeah, the gap is there quite clearly. And I suppose one of the aspects from my research that I've been speaking with young people about is the conflicts, So how do elders address conflicting beliefs between religion, culture, and African teachings? Because it seems like that's also something that pushes people away.
Yeah, I mean, the conflict is in our minds. It's not a conflict. I mean, I think where the conflict comes is if one is wedded to a colonized understanding of God, Western colonized understanding of God, and a rejection of the indigenous knowledge systems. Now there are those who would say, I've had people say this to me, I'm not African. By Black people in America say, I'm not African, I've never been to Africa. And so they disavow that connection. Ancestral lineage healing work that has never been done. I do think that there are more people now are beginning to awake into more expansive thinking, and those folk are hungry. They're desiring to know more, learn more, and it's. I always say to people, it's about ways of being in the world, and in order for the enslaved Africans to be controlled, then the colonizers had to demonize their power base, which was their spirituality. They had to demonize it. And they had to shackle the mind. So when people wake up to what really happened on a psychological level, mental, psychological, spiritual level, they say, oh, I see this in a different light. But well, one of my colleagues says it's one step to decolonize the mind, but it's another step to Africanize the mind. Like those are progressive steps. We try to do them both at the same time. Yeah. So and I always say, who tells the story has the power. Who tells the story has the power. Ways of creating, I say, narrative change are critical. And some of that thought that we actually do in our immersive cultural trips to Ghana and different places in Africa is a part of an awakening to one's deeper level of self. And there are folk who don't acknowledge that, but then they go to the slave dungeons. They walk the path to the last bath river. They participate in the naming ceremony. And it speaks to the spirit in such a way that it can't be denied. So people who never expected to embrace anything African come back and they say it was such a life transformative experience. Yeah, I didn't. Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, I don't proselytize. I don't try to convince anybody that my way is the right way. I do try to ask people to have an open mind, to be expansive in their thinking, and to find the inner parts of their own divinity. Yeah.
Thank you so much. That's beautiful. One of the things is really to build that bridge between the relationship between the elder and the younger generation. So I'd like to ask, what are your hopes for the younger generation, and what do you envision would be a healthy relationship between the elder and the younger generation? What would that look like? What are your hopes, and what would a healthy relationship between the elder generation and the youngsters look
Well, my hope would be that every young person is able to identify their personal medicine. They are able to find their purpose. They're able to live into that purpose with the support of the elders in their families and communities. So for me, that is what I hope and that is what I envision. Young person has someone that they are able to talk to, that they are connected with, that plays an important role in their formation of their values and their sense of self and their understanding of their gifts and their release of those gifts in the world. So I think that can happen in different ways. It could happen in families, in individual families. It can happen in churches. The Black church was at one time the institution that was the bedrock of the community. It is no more. In some individual mega congregations are, but for many, that is not the case. And I think one of the reasons is that it's important to recognize, to be able to read. There's a lot in the Christian church, there's a lot of emphasis on reading the Bible and studying the Bible. But I say we need to read the people. We need to read the community. We need to exegete the community. One of my DMin students said, well, I'm trying to get people back in the church. People left the church during COVID. I'm trying to get them back in the seats. And so I said, I don't know if I'm not sure you're asking the right question. Is the question really, how do I get people back in the seats? Or is the question, how do I meet the spiritual needs of the people? Well, people can be in the seat and they still have spiritual needs that are unmet. They can be not in the seats. They can be in their living room or in their bedroom, and they can have spiritual needs that are met. So what is it that you want to do? And so then it led to an extensive conversation. But yes, I think that, there is if we take seriously, and I do, African indigenous knowledges, and we believe that spirit is in all things, God is in all things are sacred, all beings, all people are connected, then we open up to these other ways of connecting with spirit, these other places, even these virtual spaces, virtual communities, or wherever folk gather. I mean, in the park, right? There are different places. I don't think place is so much the question as connection is. Community is. Community really is the question. How do you find community? We all, as human beings, need community. But, what are we doing to shape that? I started using a different phrase. I started using ontological design. So how are we designing these ways of being? Like, how do we want people to be in the world? So I would say, from the previous question that you asked, I want young people to be able to say, choose to be this way. I choose to be kind. I choose to be a light. I choose to be connected. I choose to honor my elders. I choose to remember my ancestors, right? So it's I choose joy. I choose to be mindful of the words that I speak because I know that words have power. So those teachings, I think are important, and we need elder training as much as we need youthful training. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Wow. I'll never forget those words is we need to learn to read the people, to read the communities and meet the needs based upon what we've read. Yeah. Indeed. We do need a lot of training, elder training, young people training all around. But we're moving towards the end now. And usually the way that we close is we ask the elder to pray us out in a way that is good for the community. Or say some words that will hopefully ignite or spark a light within an individual so that they can remember their purpose and walk in a better way where they can seek out an elder. So that is the invitation to you. Just pray us out or say some words.
So I would offer these words of gratitude for this opportunity to have a conversation around elders' wisdom, elders' roles and responsibilities. I trust that as these words go into the ethers, as these words go into the universe, that they land on fertile soil where they can be nurtured, can grow, and can produce of their own kind. I offer prayers that every person who views this video or listens to these words will embrace what meaning there is there again and carry it forward. I trust that the universe, the cosmos, the visible and invisible worlds are right now orchestrating and building and energizing and creating new spaces for connection, for community, for wholeness and well-being. And so let it be. Amen. And I'll say
amen, and amen. And so it is. Thank you so much. It was a deep privilege and a pleasure, and I look forward to more conversations with you in the future.